So the first speaker will be Bob Belgium. And just while we're getting set up, is Saskia speaking or no? Okay, so then on deck will be Dr. Christopher Forster.
Welcome.
Here, I will.
Oh, sorry, thanks. Thank you, Your Worship, councillors, guests. My name is Robert Belgium. I've been a paramedic here for 28 years serving the people of Chatham-Kent. I'm also a retired firefighter from Station 11 Ridgetown. I was their medical trainer. I'm a former base hospital coordinator, educator for here in Chatham-Kent. I'm an emergency room nurse. I worked in Detroit at the medical center there and here at the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance. I'm a former professor of paramedicine and nursing studies, and I've been teaching first aid to the people of Chatham-Kent for over 25 years. My PowerPoint is to address the paramedics that are going to be affected by Proposal C and also a history of paramedicine under my tenure. So this is a brief history of the paramedic colleagues of mine who I love dearly for their dedication and the commitment to the people of Chatham-Kent. Sorry, this button? Oh, okay, sorry. Didn't go. Okay. So in the early 90s in Chatham, we were at the bottom of the list to receive the life-saving enhancements. Defibrillators were showing up in London and Windsor, and it looked like Chatham was going to be at the bottom of the list. So the paramedics got together, petitioned the Ontario government. They agreed to train for free and to take no wage increase to do it, and they were successful in their efforts, and that's how we started with the defibrillators here. Okay. In the mid-90s, symptom relief came out, and again, it looked like we were going to be at the bottom of the barrel to get the symptom relief and the life-saving drugs that come in that kit there. And so they got together again and petitioned the Ontario government. They trained for free and received no wage remuneration to get these symptom relief drugs. In the mid-2000s, the voluntary IV course came about on the scene, and it's a 60-hour course. They had to travel to Windsor and to London on their own time. There was a brief stipend of 8 hours that was paid. That was only in for a year or two, and then it was rescinded. They now train for free, and they don't receive any wage increase. So a non-certified and a certified paramedic receive the same wage, but yet we were at a 70% staff certification. Some people don't know the history of the paramedics here in Chatham-Kent, but we were all Chatham and District ambulance. Some were Sunparlor and some were Bothwell, and the province gave responsibility of the ambulance and the paramedics at Chatham-Kent. One thing that's remained consistent up until this point, beginning with the first council under the Honourable Mayor Erickson, they made sure that they mandated that their jobs were protected, their years of service, and their benefits. We had one gentleman that had a massive stroke just before the download, and Bill Erickson made sure that he had benefits until he was 65. Up until now, though, unfortunately, we're not being protected. These are statements from the chief in The Voice on June 22nd, where he admits that we're all going to be laid off under Proposal C. We are not going to be guaranteed our jobs. We will have to reapply, but not preference given to. Preference will be given to those who have firefighter qualifications as well as paramedicine. And one thing that's not mentioned in there, when you apply to the Chatham-Kent Fire Department, you have to do a written test and a very grueling physical test. And I'm not sure how many of our people will be able to pass that test. We have 444 municipalities in Ontario to run the ambulance services through a second operator or outside operator. But when they took all their ambulance paramedics in, none of them took away their jobs, none of them took away their benefits or their years of service. Under Proposal C, we'll be the first one to do so. So this is Mike Gazzo. He's been a paramedic for 39 years with, I believe, over 10,000 skydives. He's in better shape than most 20-year-olds, but Mike's over 60. The fire department has a policy of mandatory retirement at 60. Mike will not be allowed to apply. He's one of our top veterans, one of our best preceptors we have, and he wants to continue on working, but he can't. This is Jackie Dath. She's the first female paramedic here in Chatham-Kent. Jackie put up with, excuse my language, but with a lot of crap. The old boys club, the sexism, just all kinds of garbage. But because of her, she's an amazing mentor, and we have a 50-50 split approximately of male and female because of her efforts and the stuff that she had to put up with. But Jackie will not be hired because she's approaching 60 by the time this thing comes to fruition. That's the exemplary service medal. We went with over 15 years without a medal being awarded here in Chatham-Kent, and the reason is they were forgotten. It wasn't until the efforts of Dave Damaris that these men and women got a medal, and that's our group there. There was actually one of the largest groups from one service they've ever seen. You may have seen this in the paper. Ron's now retired, but after 38 years, he also got a medal too, but he and other retirees under Proposal C will lose their benefits. If you're lucky to get hired, you're going to have a 6-month waiting list before you get your benefits. Pre-existing conditions will limit that to 2 years. We have a couple of young families that rely on these benefits for the treatment of their children, but they'll lose these benefits for up to 2 years.
Bob, that's 5 minutes.
You just wind it up. I know you had technical problems at the beginning, so just go ahead and wind
Thank you,
it up.
sir. So another group that's going to lose benefits are people that are on disability. A very close friend of mine is fighting a second round of cancer, and he just found out that his son has leukemia, and he says he can't afford the drugs, and they will lose their benefits under Proposal C. Just one last thing before I finish. When Sun Parlor took over the ambulance in the early, I think it was 2001, these men and women were the lowest paid paramedics in the province, and it was at a time when there was a shortage of available paramedics. We had our neighbors and the GTA in Toronto coming and cherry picking these medics. Some really good medics left, but most stayed, and they stayed because they believe in this community. This is their hometown. This is where they live. So I'll just go through.
Yes, please finish.
Okay. So past councils and mayors have respected the value of our paramedics for the service that they provide to our friends and family, and you can as well. Please just give instructions to administration that regardless of whether they vote A, B, or C, please protect these years of service and benefits of these paramedics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Dr. Christopher Forrester. On deck will be Sarah Henderson.
Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Forster. Thank you very much for giving me a few minutes of your time this evening to speak about this very important issue. So, of course, it's a huge decision when you're looking at how you're going to deliver land ambulance services for your residents. And even if it's been delayed by a few years for the ultimate decision, it's still something that deserves a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of great debate, but what seems to be lost in much of it is the question of what's really best for the patients. So that's what I wanted to raise 3 issues briefly on tonight, and I think that after considering these 3 points, you'll see that the best care will continue to come from professional paramedics working for an independent ambulance service. So the first thing that I want to just step back and recognize is that fires and pre-hospital medical emergencies are inherently different. They actually have virtually nothing in common. They require different responses from different responders. It's been suggested to you that firefighters across the province already play a major role in medical responses, and this is simply not true. With the exception of pre-hospital cardiac arrests, there's not a major role for the fire department in improving the patient care provided. In the specific case of cardiac arrest, anybody who arrives with a defibrillator sooner, whether that be a paramedic, a layperson, a firefighter, is likely to help that patient. But aside from that, there's not a major role for the fire services overall in actually improving the care. So cardiac arrests are the major thing that we can say there's actually a benefit from. How much does that actually make up of the general work of an ambulance service? And the truth is, if we look at calls in terms of cardiac arrests versus everything else, cardiac arrests are well under 1% of the work of an ambulance service. And you can continue to have the fire department being tiered to join paramedics on these calls if they can get a defibrillator to the patient's side sooner without any integration of services. So it's been suggested to you that this is a natural coupling of services, and this is simply not the case. These are completely different professions with different expertise. It's also been suggested to you that response times are the big way that this is going to be so beneficial to patients. This is completely in line with what the Ontario Professional Firefighters Association talking points are all based around. It's something that's a nice talking point because it seems intuitive. You think having a responder at a patient's side would improve their outcome, but again, with the exception of cardiac arrest, which makes up less than 1% of the work of paramedics, there's no evidence that saving seconds or even a few minutes is going to improve patients' outcomes. The best patient care will come from having a clinician with the clinical acumen of a paramedic who practices the full scope of paramedicine, including that on-scene assessment and management, the ongoing care during transport, and that handover to the emergency department staff where so many critical details need to be passed along. If you're not actually practicing that full scope of clinical care, the full scope of paramedicine, you're not going to have that clinical acumen to provide the highest level of pre-hospital care for your residents. So although response times are one measure of the quality of service, it's really a poor measure for the overall quality of care, but it's largely what a proposal like this is based around. And finally, a lot of what's suggested in the proposal is simply outlandish claims of what supposedly is going to happen and how bright the future will be. But if you actually read into these claims, and there's just a small sampling here, they're simply not supported. We see things like an improved level of safety for emergency first responders. It's never articulated in that initial proposal document how this is going to come about or what the safety issues are for first responders right now that aren't being addressed. If there is something, that should probably be addressed before a merger even happens. It talks about operational synergies and interoperability. It's a wonderful buzzword to say operational synergies, but it's meaningless. What is wrong with how fire and EMS work together now for their independent roles? And could that not be addressed through some means other than integration? And finally, they talk about economies of scale. And of course, this is just a selection since we only have a few minutes to speak tonight. But economies of scale. Firefighters will continue to need hoses. Paramedics will continue to need stretchers. Economies of scale has nothing to do with this. So with so many unsubstantiated claims like this being made, it would make you wonder about the overall proposal and what the motives behind it are. Is the goal really to improve the quality of care for your residents, or is there something else at play? So in summary, pre-hospital medical emergencies and fires are inherently different. They require different responses from different responders. Response times are a poor measure of the quality of care. And when promises such as those have been made in the Model C proposal that aren't substantiated, you should wonder about the overall report and whether it's really based around improving the quality of clinical care for your residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next presenter.
The next presenter is Sarah Henderson. On deck is Mike Stinson.
Welcome.
Thank you, Council.
Full screen down.
I don't have a nice fancy presentation for you. I'm not a politician or an accountant or anything. I'm just a paramedic. My main point here today is I'm from Chatham-Kent. I grew up here. I moved away to go to school. And I started this job later in life. And I went through a hard program. I raised 2 kids on my own. And for you to sit here and listen to a fire chief tell you that paramedics are replaceable by firemen, I think it's a mockery of our profession, because we are a profession. If you want Joe Blow to take care of your family, friends, your loved ones, and everything else, then go ahead and pass C. I mean, I respect firefighters. They do their job and we do ours. We have really nothing in common except we're looking out for our patients. They didn't do 2,000 hours worth of work like we did at all. They fight fires. We deal with medical emergencies. There's a lot of my colleagues here that are from Chatham-Kent, and if this passes, I think that we're going to think about moving out and go being a paramedic somewhere else that respects paramedics. People were talking about Navistar being not here anymore, and that was a big hit to our community. My father was a factory worker, my mother was a waitress. I wanted better for my family, and I wanted to be in the medical field still. And I chose to do this. I worked hard. I graduated with honors. And to have it just taken away is ridiculous because of the cost savings that you think you can save with a fire department having fire medics, which this Dr. Forster just talked about is a ridiculous idea. In Chief Stubing's 57 pages, he did say that our Medavie EMS is doing really well. We're meeting all the standards that we're supposed to. There's no risk to the municipality in regards to labor relations, WSIB, anything like that. And the public has qualified paramedics at their sides instead of newly trained fire medics that might not be trained as well. Basically, I'd like to say that fire helps us, they augment us, they can't replace us. And that's really about all I have to say.
Thank you. Next presenter.
Next presenter is Mike Stinson. On deck will be Belinda Keith.
Welcome.
Your Worship, councillors, my fellow brothers and sisters that have joined us here tonight, thanks for taking the time to listen this evening. Promise, I'll make this quick. There are a number of facts and opinions before you. I'm not going to hash them out. You've heard them all, you've seen them, and you have to make decisions that are best for your constituency. I hold before you here a petition. It's signed by the public for this council, which in its essence opposes a blended service. Going through it today, there's several people I know on it. There's nurses, there's paramedic chiefs, there's former paramedic chiefs, there's frontline firefighters, both career and volunteer, that have all signed this petition. The reasons are many, and I'm sure you've heard almost all of them. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 33 years old. I'm likely the anomaly here in Chatham-Kent. In an age of declining population and shrinking economy, I came here in 2003 for the privilege to work as a paramedic when I was 20 years old. I've settled in along with my wife of 10 years. She also works here. We have 3 kids together, and we've embedded ourselves in this community. I coach hockey, I've fundraised for organizations, and I'm happy to volunteer my time for people to help. Much like me, my wife, she supports the community. She volunteers at our local church, and she also works full-time. What's on the line with Model C for us personally is everything that we've built here. I know this is business, but how is it fair that firefighters are guaranteed no layoffs while we struggle for answers? I'm not going to talk long about numbers. What you have in Model A is cost certainty. You have job security for your paramedics, and you have a continuing high standard of patient care for your constituents. What you have in Model C are uncontrollable variables and assumptions. 2 quotes that I take directly from the presentation itself. Another reason I truly believe that EMS needs to remain separate from the fire department is that we do fully 87% of the calls between fire and EMS here in Chatham-Kent. This is an overwhelming majority. And we're speaking about healthcare and the well-being of our citizens here. It's a specialty. It's one that consumes the vast majority of the emergencies we have. It's important, and in my opinion, it's an area that deserves to have a standalone delivery. We're trained, we're scrutinized, we're competent, and we've always been the boots on the ground for the people here in CK. We chose this job, we love this job, and it's what we want to continue to do for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next presenter.
The last presenter this evening is Belinda Keith.
Dear Mayor, council members, bear with me. I had a video to play. Unfortunately, it was deemed to be too graphic. So I'm going to read it. Hopefully I get through it. Every time I tell someone what I do for a living, I get the inevitable, what's the worst thing you've seen? And every time I have to relive a bunch of horrible moments I was witness to. Why? Because I can't choose. Was it the time I had to pull a baby from his mother's arms in order to perform CPR? Or maybe it was the time I had to tell an elderly man that the love of his life had died. I have to use the word died or dead. We're taught that pass on, gone to a better place, or is with God now is not appropriate in order to avoid an already confusing situation. Or maybe it was the time I had to look a family friend in the eye and tell him how vital it was to get to the hospital to see his dad. Unfortunately, I can't tell him why, patient confidentiality. Or maybe it was the calls that I do day in and out, day out in nursing homes, paying witness to the forgotten, men and women lining the hallways, hoping that today is the day that someone remembers them. Or the blank stare on the driver's face as he sat patiently waiting for his legs to be freed from the wreckage. Or the time I watched the spirit drain from that young man's eyes as his friend's dead body is being hauled off on the stretcher and he realizes that this is his fault. Or this man swinging by his neck in his garage rafters. Or the time I had to determine if I was looking at brain matter or clotted blood. This is only a handful of 1,000 stories we as Chatham-Kent paramedics have witnessed to, but it's not the worst of it. Then there is the not so horrifying about the time I was attending to the child in the back of my unit was struck by a car that did not heed to our lights and sirens. I ended up being in the hospital for longer than my patient. Or the time I had to spend 2 hours cleaning the blood from the back of my unit from a head injury, or dodging blood from the rag the intoxicated man was swinging around. Then there was that time the drug addict kept spitting at me. Those are always good times. I still don't know what diseases he tested positive for. Again, patient confidentiality, yet still not the worst of it. Being disrespected daily from patients who abuse the health system. Those that are under the impression that if they call an ambulance for splinters and paper cuts, will get a bed sooner. Or the patient who is yelling at you that he pays your wages and is badgering you to do your job his way. Or being called to the same house daily, or almost daily anyway, for a patient who verbally abuses you because he thinks it's his right. Or being called an ambulance driver and treated like a taxi despite your college degree in medical interventions. Again, not the worst of it. How about missing the birth of my nephew because I was working that holiday Monday, or not being able to attend my daughter's dance recital because we got a late call, or having to call my grandma and tell her I can't make it to Grandpa's funeral because we have a mandatory test, or missing Christmas yet again because somebody's got to work the holidays. Or maybe it's being told you are emotionally unavailable because you've learned not to get personally involved, or being told you're cold-hearted because you've learned not to be affected by what you see and hear and feel, or not being able to talk to friends and family about a call that's really bothering you. There's that patient confidentiality again. Then there's the physical aspect. No, kiddo, I can't push you on the swing. I hurt my back lifting. A guy who's faking back pain in order to get his hands on some narcotics. Or having to quit physical activities you love because your knees just can't handle it anymore. From carrying 75 pounds of essential equipment up and down countless stairs. Still, not the worst of it. The worst of it, being disregarded, not being appreciated, being made to feel irrelevant. Being treated as though we are replaceable by those who are supposed to protect us and guide us, by those who manage us and lead us, by those who are responsible and are supposed to have the citizen's best interest at heart. Being treated as though what we do daily is not important, our value being determined by a dollar amount. By those making us beg to be seen and heard and explain how and why we make a difference. Listening to the paramedic chief tell you that he can't discuss the plan for the future of your paramedics. Paramedics have always taken a backseat to other emergency services, and we've always been content not being in the spotlight. We don't see ourselves as heroes, and nor do we want to. Because being recognized is not what is important to us, our patients are. But to be disregarded, now that is the worst of it. We are not replaceable. We counsel each other, advise each other, and we use each other as soundboards. We trust each other with our safety and in each other's knowledge and ability to do the task at hand. We vent, we laugh, we share, we eat, we drink, we celebrate, and we mourn together. My fellow paramedics are not replaceable. Yes, we signed up for this. Yes, we knew we were getting ourselves into. We knew we would see the good, the bad, and the ugly. We knew we were going to sacrifice our families, our bodies, and our sanity. And yes, we love it. And no, not one of us would have done it differently. Why? Because we're made for this. We carry those burdens, those scars with pride, and when it gets too heavy, we hold each other up. We are each other's family, friends, confidants. We are partners. This is not our job. This is our calling. This is not what we do. This is who we are. We are paramedics. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda deals with the consent agenda. Councillor Fluker.
Your Worship, I would like to put forward a motion that we bring 16A forward now at this time and put the consent agenda after we deal with 16A. I'd like to put that motion forward if there's a seconder.
It's been moved by Councillor Fluker and seconded by Councillor Oche. Motion to move forward. All those in favor? All those opposed? Looks like it's carried. We're going to move to 16A, dealing with the first. Done.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 16A, Chatham-Kent Fire and Emergency Services Review.
To the Chief and to Mike, you have a small presentation on this? Or Bob, sorry. Switch the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I don't have a presentation for the screen, but I thought it'd be helpful after some discussion with my CAO today and the Chief to talk a little bit about how we got here today. I want to recognize the fact that it's a highly emotional conversation and topic for our friends in the audience, and we do value everything that paramedics do in our community. 5 years ago, emergency services was struggling with rampant overtime costs, difficult labor relations environments, and other challenges under the direction of the former fire chief, that's me. Council was very direct at the time in expressing their ongoing and serious concerns regarding the need to find ways to avoid and contain costs, engage our part-time or volunteer staff while still meeting the minimum standards of emergency response, mitigation, education, and preparedness. Over recent years, since enlisting Ken Stubing as the new fire chief and his very capable team, which he has assembled, we have systematically and successfully addressed the pressures of runaway overtime on the full-time wage line. In addition, CK Fire and Emergency Services leadership moved the entire department from an inefficient hybrid of composite full-time and part-time elements into an integrated, fully composite fire department, resulting in significant reductions of cost while improving effectiveness of fire suppression operations. This continuous improvement throughout CK, Fire and Emergency Services provided all CK residents with excellent, professional, effective, and efficient emergency services. Our CK FES team, under the leadership of Ken Stubing, has delivered consistently positive results on all the projects we've undertaken to date. Now, while we have in the past found ways to contain costs and risks via contracting out our EMS service delivery with Medavie, ongoing research and plans exposed other looming concerns. And Council's aware of some of these. As our costs, particularly health costs, continue to soar, with more cost hikes on the horizon, the fire paramedic chief and team has toiled to consider all possible service delivery models, taking into account effectiveness, efficiency, but really focusing on delivering the best possible patient care to residents of Chatham-Kent. As Council prepares to consider our next steps regarding the delivery of fire and EMS services to the public, please take note of those previous points. We have a high-performing team that has participated in the process of fire and EMS planning over the last 2 years intensively. And this team includes corporate services, health and family services, community development, infrastructure, and the COO's office. After examining all the elements of such a serious decision, our corporate team's in agreement as the next steps. We're eager to move the project forward. Now, we want you to please recognize that in supporting a 2-year extension, staff will be empowered to bring a comprehensive and fully developed operational plan and recommendation to council, taking into account all the stakeholders in their various positions. This will allow our team to lead and manage our way through the significant cost and service level increases, which we've determined will need to be dealt with in the very near future. This will also enable our team to ease the concerns of all stakeholders in this process and provide factual information regarding the positive impacts of supporting the recommended changes. So if you would, just bear that in mind. I want to bring you, just to give you some context, I've been here for 15 years. This has been an ongoing challenge, and the future has some very serious problems coming our way, serious financial problems for this community if we're going to continue to develop effective patient care, give patients the care they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, Councillor Mike, you have something?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a very quick 3-slide presentation just to kind of go over the numbers. I know there's always been a little bit of uncertainty on some of the numbers, so this is just try to provide some clarification.
Okay.
So what we've all heard about is the Model A, B, and C. So what I'm trying to do is just try to present it in a simple fashion. So we heard about the multiple options as well. So this is just all option 1, status quo service, exactly the way it's being presented right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through Model A first. So you can see that Model A, the Medavie quoted price for 2017 services, $10,463,416. So what we've done is we've said, okay, based on the 2016 contract, if we extended that, what would that budget look like for 2017? So that's the first column that we've got there. So what we've done is we've said, okay, well, what is fire cost? What is the municipal costs that are associated with the ambulance program? So there's a lot of costs that we have for capital costs and different things and some of the management costs. So that's another $1.6 million. The Medavie contract for 2016 was the $9.3 million, and the Ministry of Health funding we received was $5.5 million, which is a reduction. So that came to $20,097,000. So that's what would have been estimated if the contract had been extended for another year, sort of on the same principle. So with the Medavie contract, you can see that the top 2 figures are exactly the same, and then the new contracted price for 2017 is $10,463,000. The one challenge that we have with the Ministry of Health funding is that funding is based on the previous year's budget. So you can see that despite the fact that the price has gone up, that funding is based on our previous year budget. So there is no increase in the Ministry of Health funding for 2017. So that's why that figure remains constant. So you can see that the difference of that is that $1.1 million. That's an additional $1.1 million in the 2017 budget based on Model A. So there has been some savings built into 2017 prices for overall management restructuring. Like I just commented on, the increased budget in 2017 would be partially mitigated in 2018 because the increased cost in 2017, the province would pick up an additional share of that in 2018 based on the 2017 budget. There's also a price increase of $215,000 for the 2018 service based on the 2-year contract. Okay, so then we wanted to show a little bit about Model B. Model B is municipal delivery, separate department, basically the same status quo, but there's now municipal employees. So you can see in this model, obviously the 2017 old contract being rolled forward is exactly the same. The 2017 estimated budget municipal costs, there's a little bit of increased costs in the fire aspect of it due to the management of some of the factors. The overall ambulance costs, including the municipal components of it, and then the contract being rolled into municipal employees, would be just under 12 million, and you can see the Ministry of Health funding would obviously remain static. So that price would be slightly higher than the Model A by about $30,000. So all paramedics would become municipal employees. There's approximately 47 full-time and 30 plus part-time. They would gain job security and stability, and they would gain the OMERS pension. Again, the increase in budget in 2017 would be partially mitigated by the ministry funding in 2018, as again, there's that 1-year lag based on the budget. It also would add another emergency service department to manage, and all prices would increase annually by collective agreement provisions, and in this scenario, there would be 2 unions to deal with. So finally, Model C. This is the blended service that we've heard a lot about. Certainly, they'd be municipal employees again. So when we look at the first column again, it's exactly the same. It's that old contract brought forward. And then here's the pricing. So the estimated 2017 budget for quoted, you can see there's a reduction in the fire side. There's some reduction in the municipal cost for ambulances. And then the other component would stay the same as the Ministry of Health funding. So the overall cost is actually a reduction of about $1.3 million to the comparable 2017 budget. So what does this do? There's some increased level of service included in this model. There's an additional first response unit with advanced care paramedics. Again, there's job security and stability for paramedics moving forward. There would be 65 new full-time positions, and those employees would gain OMERS pension. Discussions would be required with the ministry on the funding, would be required, but we also have confidence in the costs that we've compiled. And again, price increases annually by collective agreement provisions, except in this scenario, there'd be 1 union to deal with. We could also add an additional ambulance, and we would still be within the current budget for 3 years. So that's all I've put together on this, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Hi, and through the mayor. Actually, I had questions prior to yours, but you kind of brought up other ones. Before I begin, though, I'd actually like to move the recommendations and put them on the floor, if I may.
You're moving the recommendations that are presented?
Yes, recommendation 1 and 2 as presented.
It's been being moved. The recommendations 1 and 2 are being moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor. Seconder, Councillor Foss. Councillor Carmen, you have, McGregor, you have the floor.
Actually, yes, and actually, I don't know if it's going to be through to Chief Stubing or to our past chief, I'm not sure. But there were talk about, if we move forward on this, that we will have a further report and further details that will come back, and we've heard that through the report and such. When exactly would we see a report come back to council if this passes?
Through you, Mayor Hope, to council. Councillor, certainly the recent announcement by the Premier has changed the landscape. We were aware of some stuff being talked provincially, but it certainly, raises some timing issues for us. So our belief is in Model B or C, we would need to apply to the province with our operational plan and get a license. We believe we could turn that around at the earliest by what we've been told is anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. Certainly Medavie's expressed some of this in other jurisdictions. So that would put us into late fall of 2016 with maybe a buffer of a couple months. We could expect to be back in front of council with the rest of the answers to what you would need to validate everything that we're talking about by early January, February of next year.
Okay, thank you. I think that answered even my questions, and through you to Mr. Turner, I'm guessing that depending on what comes back from the province, then we may see some different scenarios as to what we've been presented as far as financial information.
Yeah, through your worship, yeah, we definitely want to sit down with the province and go over the modeling and just ensure that they understand it completely and ensure that the funding is supported.
Just one last follow-up. Obviously, if we go through and we do this at least sets up a 2-year contract to start with, and then we'll go forward from there and investigate further. Correct? Okay.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Hope, we've had some preliminary conversations with the base hospital, certainly other stakeholders as well. Our model, just for clarity, is not the fire medic model I keep hearing about. We have spoken out numerous times about that. We don't support that model. This is fully licensed paramedics working on an ambulance platform, just for clarity. Okay.
Now, just one last follow-up, sorry, through to Chief Stubing. Now, we do have actually, do we not have some cross-trained fire paramedics within our system now? And if so, have they not had the full paramedic training that all paramedics would have?
Through you, Mayor Hope, certainly been asked that question a bunch of times as well. In the report, we've identified that we've had, by January, we will have close to 50% of our full-time firefighters who had originally cross-trained. Now, they're not all clinically active, but certainly a significant portion of them are, and certainly a bunch of our volunteers who are actually in this room tonight have cross-training and work for the current contract provider or for another EMS provider. And others in this room have even applied to us since this model was announced.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Through you to Mike Turner. Mike, I know in the book they're looking at 2 years, but do you have all the numbers on 5 years that were also given to us by Medavie?
Thank you, Councillor Oche. I do. I'm going to just change presentations here. So rather than get into the same level of detail that I provided on the last one, what I've done here is I've basically shown what 5 years would cost all in for the old contract brought forward. Obviously, that's not an option here, but it's just a comparable figure. So that's the first column of 103 million. The 5-year Medavie contract would come to just under 107 million for the 5 years, including all the fire and then the Ministry of Health funding credits and everything. The budget with the 2-year EMS proposed, Medavie 3 years blended service, so basically the recommendation that's in the RTC, that would be about 103 million, just over 103 million. So you can see that that's even comparable to what the old contract being extended for 5 years would have been. And certainly, I wanted to show the 5-year budget of the blended service. If it was implemented in 2017, it would be just under $102 million. Now, obviously, we're probably not ready to implement that for January 1st, 2017, but I just wanted to show that as a comparison. So basically, the savings between the 5-year Medavie contract and the 2-year contract plus the 3 years of blended service, or the 5-year blended service, range between $3.8 and $5.2 million. As we add additional resources throughout the different options, and if, for example, if we just added an additional ambulance to the entire system, savings could potentially reach $7 million over the 5 years.
Thank you, Mike.
Just a point of clarity, Mayor and Council. When we recommended the 2-year option, recommended status quo as far as resources. I could not support a 5-year contract without adding resources to EMS. In the report, we shared with you the number of code zeros that our contractor, Medavie, has provided to us on the rise, the length of those code zeros, the number of code 8s. 50% of our call volume are people standing on the side of the road waiting, hedging their bets between two communities, which doesn't provide paramedics respite and certainly increases response time to both the communities they're standing by. So that is one of the reasons we didn't recommend 5 years, is because we would suggest you need to add additional resources to EMS if you're going to go anything beyond 2 years.
Thank you, Chief. Through you, Mayor Hope, to Chief Stubing. So the firemen that you have that are 50% of your full-time firemen are also paramedics, and they would be able to do anything that the paramedics can do right now on their truck? Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Hope. Good question. Get asked this a lot as well. So for clarity, by January, because we're having 2 more retirements, so the 65 positions that we're talking about are net new positions on top of current staffing. So those 65 positions would be, because they're all full-time, would be able to staff all the current ambulance service provision hours that are currently being provided in the service today. The additional staff that you're talking about, although 65% or approximately 50% of them were cross-trained, they're not all clinically active. So if they wanted to become clinically active, they would have to go through the base hospital to do that. We have a significant portion of that 50% of our staff who are clinically active, either through Medavie or somewhere else. So about 20 to 25% of our staff are clinically active. And that does not include our volunteer component.
Through you, Mayor. So when you say clinically active, they could administer drugs or anything that?
They're not currently working in an EMS service and licensed by the base hospital to perform that scope of practice, yes. Okay. So they might have done the training 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago and not been working in EMS. Again, as a former base hospital program manager, I would receive requests for people coming back to working in EMS after having been off for an extended period of time because of personal health issues, family issues, parental issues, whatever. That is a reactivation process, and the longer you're off, the more difficult it is to reactivate, but typically a couple years is not a difficult challenge to reactivate. But it's all done under the purview of the base hospital, and it would be their requirements that we would follow. So typically base hospitals on a yearly basis require, it's base hospital specific, require anywhere from 8 to 16 hours of CME and certification requirements for primary care paramedics, higher for advanced care paramedics, and then anytime you're out of clinical activity would add to that training. So you'd have to do at least that amount of training and be able to be found safe to practice. And if there was a gap, they would do more training.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Hope.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Leclerc.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. You're probably going to understand what I'm trying to get at here, so maybe Judy can help me. Could I ask for an amendment to recommendation number 1 that council approve the 5-year contract? If I get a second.
You're asking the clerk, or are you asking me? Because my answer is no, but you can refer.
Well, then I'll ask the clerk.
That's a different intent to the motion, so we would have to put this on the floor. If it fails, then we could put another motion on, but that amendment would change the intent of the motion on the floor.
Bob, what do you think?
So she agrees with my answer, no.
Okay, so we can't, so we have to vote on this. If it fails, then I could bring a motion for a 5-year contract, correct? Okay, can we separate the 2 recommendations?
Yeah.
Mayor Hope, you sure?
Can separate, yes.
We can separate. Okay. Well, the comments that I have, I think they've all been said by most that are here this evening, so I'll just wait and see. Hopefully we defeat both these recommendations, and I'll come back with a motion to accept a 5-year contract. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Leclerc, followed by Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few comments. Over the past few weeks, I've met with quite a few paramedics. I respect you, and all of council respects you, your work. It's just difficult for us. We can't speak from the heart sometimes because of legalities and everything else, but we all need you. We need this service. However, as a council, we represent 102,000 people. So when things are given to us to look at, to make plans, to adjust, well, we have to listen and we have to open up our eyes. And council also, I met over the past 2 weeks, I had 2 senior members in my home. I opened up my home to them to listen, to try and understand. And I do understand somewhat, and it's very frustrating what we can do. I'm going to be supporting this as it is. However, Chief, I've heard it many times. We're not asked for our opinion. our advice? How can we give some input? Is there any way we can, moving forward, it says council directs administration. Is there any way that we can select from the peers, the paramedics need to maybe select 2 or 3 members, with open minds, the fire open minds, council 1 to 3 or 5 members. Is there any way to have that dialogue so we have everything encompassed? Speaking to these paramedics, there's no doubt what they do. The trauma they have to go through, what they need to do. I believe we need more paramedics also. So how we get there, that's my end game is, as a counselor, I need more service out there in the paramedics. You have a plan that you believe will work. I need to trust your plan because we heard earlier that you've reduced some costs where nobody else could reduce that cost. You've done some things. I've heard some comments, it will not happen, he can't do it. Well, it's not my job or Councillor Fluker's job to implement all this. Sorry, Councillor. It is you, Chief Stubing, but I value the paramedics' advice, their experience, So I don't know if I need to add number 3 or can I get some direction, and maybe John Norton will have to come into, maybe there's some legalities. I don't know, but my ask is there any way to get everybody involved in this decision-making, because it's very important and lives are at stake, basically,
Chief, would you like to respond?
Through you, Mayor Hope, certainly I understand your empathy. I feel exactly the same way, although I've been cast as not. Some days it sucks to be a manager, and this is one of those days. I've been challenged by council to find a sustainable way for fire and EMS to exist well into the future of Chatham-Kent. That is what drove this service review. I was selected by council to look at that. Everything we've been doing has been based on that premise. Everything we've recommended falls within our purview and our responsibilities under the Ambulance Act and the Fire Prevention Protection Act. I agree with what you've said about the paramedics. I think they do a fantastic job. I am a paramedic, not clinically active for some time, but certainly agree that that job is important in our community. Without a plan moving forward, all services in Chatham-Kent may be at risk. Bridges, culverts, police services, fire services, EMS services. What we're trying to do is once and for all address the job security issue for paramedics. We've heard that loud and clear, but unfortunately right now they do not work for us. So I would be in a very difficult position. The lawyer our chief legal officer may step in and give you his advice on who we can talk to, and we have some information for you enclosed. But what I can tell you is we would expect full public information sessions to be shared with what we can share if council continues to go down this road. There is some information that we can share. We'll have more information after we've talked to the Ministry of Health and some other stakeholders in this process. We would see public consultation as part of that communication strategy. But certainly we have some information to share and close as well, because a lot of it has to do with contractual or labor issues.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley, followed by Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was a bit confused at the start because I thought we were asking questions of Mr. Turner, and then we kind of rolled over in debate on the motion. So I'm going to say my comments on the basis of the motion that is before us. So I've got a number of things here that I've written down, and I'll try to make it as succinct and common sense as I can. First of all, one thing I want to state right off the bat is that I thought it was nice because all the presentations tonight were respectful. And as Councillor Leclerc said, paramedics are appreciated, and I would be honored for any one of you to pick me up in an emergency and save my life. There's a couple of things I wanted to clear up. There's been some concerns and comments out in the public that council didn't have adequate reports or adequate information for this decision. I can't speak for the other members of council, but I did. To me, the whole issue crystallized in my mind fairly early on the basis of what we were told and what we were learning. And the other thing is that people have to understand that a lot of the information we got was in closed sessions. And that was really the information that turned to my mind, was what I learned in closed sessions of council. And one of the things that I'd also like to say is that I think Chief Stubing has thought very creatively, and I appreciate that from all staff. Doesn't mean I have to agree with everything that you think, but I like the fact that you're thinking creatively and you're looking outside the box and bringing ideas forward, because this whole idea, whether I support it or not, made me think differently and made me understand things in a better way, and I appreciate that. One of the things I think that we have to consider when we're looking at this, and a couple of things, is that, you know, I thought about the two positions and I thought, okay, a firefighter runs into burning buildings. A paramedic goes to gruesome accident scenes. There may be some people in this world who can do both of those things, but I bet you there's more people who can't do both of those things. Some are made to go see gruesome accident scenes, which I'm not, and some are made to run into burning buildings, which I'm probably also not. But I appreciate those, and I think they're very different and very distinct, and I think they have very different physical qualifications. Absolutely. I'll bet you there's firefighters who couldn't go to an accident scene, and I bet you there's paramedics that wouldn't want to run into a burning building, and that's the way I see it. I can't support option C. I haven't been able to support option C since this debate began, and it's for reasons, unfortunately, that I can't go into, because it was a closed session. A lot of my whole decision-making process took place in closed session. And anybody who has contacted me on the issue, I've been very clear with them. I've said, I can't support option C, but I can't tell you why. And that's just the way it is. But I will give you an example. And one of the examples is that I just don't believe that the cost savings that we've talked about, when you take in totality all of the things we discussed in closed, I don't think they're sufficiently achievable to support going with a blended service. I just don't. There are some issues out there that if they go our way, yeah, there could be some cost savings, and I would suggest that on the information that Mr. Turner said under option C, 1.3 million in cost savings, that sounds like a lot. But when I look at the issues in closed session, if they go the wrong way, those savings will be gone in an instant, and the service will be extremely more expensive. And so we're doing a balancing act, saying, do we think those issues we talked about in closed are going to go in our favor, or do they think they're going to go against us? I think it's a 50-50, and I can't support what I would see if they went against this. So that being said, I think going with a 5-year Medavie contract gives us the most stable costs, and I think it's best for our citizens, and I think it's best for the safety of our citizens, and that's what I'm going to support. And I would suggest to those who are supporting a 2-year agreement, may want to think to make that 5 years, because you might get support from some other members of council, but you take your chances. I will certainly, if the 2-year recommendation fails, I will be supporting what Councillor Bondi said to go with 5 years. And quite frankly, I would like to see recommendation 2 gone away with altogether. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Myers. Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Your Worship. My questions are more specific as far as finances. And Mr. Turner, I need you to answer these questions, but I need you to put the screen back up of your initial 3 slides. That one, we'll start right there. Thanks. I understand the MOH funding scenario and how that's mitigated in 2018 as opposed to 2017. But what I want to know is once you get past that and you go into the next year, that 50% funding, is it recouped the following year, or is it simply 50% going forward? Through your worship. So basically it's 50% of the previous year's budget. So there'll always be a lag of 1 year. So,
Okay.
We would recoup the, 50% of that 1.1 million for 2017, but the costs go up another 215 that
Okay.
year. So we'd be short, instead of 1.1 million, we'd be short half of the 1.1 plus 215 for 2018.
And then on your last bullet point on that particular slide, where 2018, it goes up by 215,000, the same scenario applies, correct? That we would get 50% of that.
That's correct. In 2019, we would recoup half of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you could go to the third slide then, the one dealing with Model C. That would be the one that projects the 1.3 savings, 1.3 million savings.
That's correct, yes.
Is that consequently not also impacted by MOH funding? Then, would that not be reduced by 50% in 2018?
Correct. You're correct. So if 2017's budget was, the same as 2016, there would be no increase in the Ministry of Health funding in 2018, sort of thing. It would be the same as 2017's budget would be the same as 2016. There'd be no increase in the Ministry of Health funding. So for the first few years of Model C, certainly the Ministry of Health funding would be lower. As the costs might escalate throughout a few years, then it would sort of balances off against where Model A might be down the road, and then the funding would equalize.
Okay, you might be a little ahead of me on that.
Okay.
Just in simple terms, 1.3, is it actually 1.3, or in 2018, is it half of that?
2018, it would go down a little bit. It would go down, I think it's approximately about $1 million, Peter, is that savings in 2018? I think it would be down about $1 million savings in 2018.
That's what I needed. Thank you.
Councillor Brock McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I do have a question for Chief Stubing, but before I do want to reiterate some comments from Councillor Leclerc and Councillor Wesley and say that certainly I think it's fair to say everyone around the Horseshoe greatly respects paramedics in our community, and certainly I appreciated the phone calls and emails coming up to today, so thank you for that. It's a very quick question. You mentioned the difference in the 2 and 5 year proposals and adding service. So I guess my question is, what is the difference in a 2 year and 5 year option if we're unable to meet service targets over that 5 years? So if we go with a 5 year model in 3 years, if we find at our current levels we're not meeting those service targets, what does it look like to try and add service?
Through you, Mayor Hope, good question, and certainly a difficult thing to sort out in an RFI process. So just for council's information, we tried as hard as we could to maintain transparency and be ethical during this process. So we have a purchasing bylaw. We put out an RFI. We had one respondent. We sat down with that respondent and said, we would like you to cost various things for council's consideration, because we were doing a State of the Union address on fire and EMS. That State of the Union certainly address showed that EMS was under pressure. So we thought it was important for council, particularly heading into a 5 year contract, whether or not they wanted to add any other resources. So in each of the models, we costed out the same thing, and then everybody who submitted to the bid could do a value add. So the option 1 that we've talked about is adding no more capacity to EMS. We would keep our EMS units as they're currently staffed, and I don't mean with full-time and part-time. What I mean is the number of units staffed in Chatham 24/7, one in Wallaceburg, an FRU in Blenheim. Then option 2, we added an FRU, another first response unit, to the system to help stop the clock, and added the possibility of an advanced care paramedic in that. In each of the models, we didn't add ACP training, advanced care paramedic training, but the staffing of an advanced care paramedic. In Model 3, we in option 3 in each model, we costed changing the FRU in Blenheim to an ambulance, which would be another paramedic 24 hours a day. And then we added as a 4th option, leaving the FRU alone in Blenheim, because I know there's interest in leaving that alone, another ambulance to the system. And that's where the cost really escalates. So it's $1.1 million for status quo and over $2 million to add another ambulance. And then certainly you have the discussions that are happening provincially about community paramedicine possibly being able to offset operational capacity. I totally get that, but we already overwhelmed you with a ton of information. So that's partly why we suggest a 2-year contract extension, have the discussions with everybody, take a look at those performance metrics, and although appreciate the doctor's presentation, I agree, response times are not the best indicator of patient outcomes, but they are a performance metric in our contract, and they are a performance metric we have to report to the Ministry of Health. And they are under pressure, certainly right now.
So yeah, I guess that's my concern between the 2 and the 5-year model, is if there is a mechanism to add service during that 5 years, if that's what we end up going with, to meet those criteria. I mean, that's something that I guess I struggle with between the 2 and the 5-year model.
I appreciate that, Councillor. That's why I said I could not support a 5-year model without additional resources.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Turner again, if I could. Through your worship to Mr. Turner, the numbers, and I'm only asking about the numbers, so I'm asking you. Okay. The numbers that we see before us are numbers that are dealing with the operations only, correct?
That's correct.
Can you confirm that there's no capital in the, when we look at Model C, if there has to be capital expenditure, we don't see any of it in that comparison?
You're right. There's no capital up in this presentation. There is some minor capital dollars of one-time costs that are associated. For example, there's some uniform costs, there's some IT costs. We've anticipated those are about $300,000 one time. We've looked at the sort of the changes to the facilities that would be required. They're in the costing, but they're a reduction off of the one-time capital costs. Right? So we've looked at facilities and some work that might need to be done in the facilities, but by also divesting of some facilities, we'd be able to recoup most of that cost. So that would almost be an in and an out as far as the capital costs on that. And looking at the fleet, certainly all of the capital costs on the fleet side of things are already incorporated into our budget. And looking at the operational side, our costing is very comparable to the amount that's in the Medavie contract as well. So we felt comfortable that that pricing was consistent.
Okay, so if there's any suggestion of new buildings or that's not in there?
So there is no new buildings. There's some talk of doing some renovations on 2 of the existing stations. There's also, in that same vein, divesting of 2 facilities as well. So if that occurs, then the cost is generally offset by funds that could be recouped.
So if we divest of a building, we don't have those numbers, right? So I have no idea what they are.
That's correct, yeah.
So I don't know what the projection is of divesting of a small building and whether there may be a proposal to buy land and build a new building. We simply don't know that, correct?
You don't have that information because there was basically, when we did the analysis, there was no additional cost to that. So
based on the belief that you can divest one building, acquire land, and build another building at no cost?
There'd be no building of new buildings in this proposal. This is taking the existing stations and doing some maintenance and renovations on those.
So the building that's attached next door would stay. It's part of this building.
That's correct.
No divestiture of that.
That's correct. So if in the future, down the road, that there was a suggestion of that, that would form part of that new budget request in down the road.
Oh.
I'm not suggesting that there is one. I'm just saying that that would be that part of it.
I understand. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Verkunen, please.
Yeah, Your Worship, I have a question for Chief Ken. The volunteer fire department, I understand you said they would not be affected to this plan. What about the future? I heard you talking about changing our first response to ambulance service. Is that because the full-time fire department will be servicing as in ambulances, would they be coming to Blenheim then as paramedics?
Through you, Mayor Hope, certainly recall the conversation, Councillor. What we had suggested would there be no change to our volunteer numbers. So the same number of volunteer firefighters we have now would continue. Those stations would staff as they do now. In stations that currently have paramedics working at them, like Thamesville, Tilbury, they would be cross-trained people working in the ambulance, but the volunteer firehouse would stay staffed with the same component of volunteer firefighters it has now.
So that wouldn't happen, let's say, in my rural area.
So in Blenheim, for example, your first response unit would have one cross-trained individual and the exact same number of volunteer firefighters that you have currently.
So as far as you're concerned, there's no chance that you're changing it from first response to an ambulance? Because Blenheim's happy with first response.
So we've had this conversation a couple times, Councillor.
But I'm not getting.
So one of the options in front
a
of
straight answer a while back, and I just want to get it now.
one of the options. Certainly, it's not my position to say what the level of service is set by council. Council will direct us to do that. One of the costs in front of you is you can consider changing the first response unit in Blenheim to an ambulance if you chose to. But you don't have to choose to do that. And it has nothing to do with Model C, B, or A. That's a separate decision unto itself. You can do that in Model A, B, or C, because each model has been costed with that. And it's a consideration for you. It's option 3 in the costing chart you have in front of you in each model.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Mayor. A lot of my questions have been answered. It's been going very well. But I will say this, I will be supporting a 5-year plan. And also, I'm going to ask if item 1 and 2 be voted on separately.
Yes, that's request has
Yes.
already been.
Okay.
Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Your Worship. One question I have, if we were to increase our level of service, say put another ambulance on, would the ministry increase our funding any sooner than they are now?
I'm certainly glad you asked that through you, Mayor Hope. I was trying to wave at our Chief Financial Officer when he was answering a previous question. So there are conversations we need to have with the ministry under each model. The first model, Model A, will be a change to our funding because it goes over the 3 to 5% increase that they typically give you without really any rigor. The cost of $1.1 million is obviously significantly more than that, and there's a 1-year lag. So what we've said in every model is we have to have a discussion with the ministry, but the discussion with the ministry is different for every model. So for Model A, the license to operate an ambulance is really not a topic of conversation because they already have one. The contractor has one. Really, it'll be a discussion about our costs going up immediately in 1 year. The conversation with them about Model 2 is that conversation because in Model B, we've flipped between 1 and 2 and A and B in the past. In Model B, it's the same conversation with cost, but also we need to apply for an ambulance license. And as a provider, you need to provide an operational plan to the ministry. So we would have to provide that operational plan, and it would be subject to council saying they agree with the first response unit in Blenheim, they agree with whatever you decide to do from a level of service. Model C, we would have to basically do the same as Model B, apply for an ambulance license, give them our operational plan, give them assurances that every ambulance would meet the Ambulance Act and be certified with paramedics when they're working in an ambulance platform. The fact that they happen to have been trained as a firefighter is not a concern when they're working in the ambulance, although it might be a concern with people in this room. I've certainly heard that. But the conversation we don't have to have with the ministry is our funding cap, because we're within our funding cap. So I think that's what the chief financial officer was trying to share that we're within our funding cap currently. And what we would be saying is, this is our funding projection over the next 3 to 5 years based on that model. And they end up at about the same place.
I guess I'm satisfied with that, because the fact is that our level of service could easily change. And I think having that negotiations with the province is a very important factor here, so. And hopefully that they'll increase that funding sooner than later, rather than lagging it back a year.
Sorry, Councillor, and to finalize the question, so if we got an extra ambulance, it would not speed up the funding requirement. It would still be a lag, and now we have to go it alone for not only 1.1 million, probably another million on top of that for a year, and we're going to be that much longer to try and catch up on it. Sorry. Apologize, I didn't.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? I do have some, but mine are of closed session nature. I need counsel, if they don't agree, that we move into closed session so I can get my questions answered. If not, then I guess my questions don't get answered.